In 2019, scientists announced a new human species. It stood barely 3 feet tall. The island of Luzon in the northern Philippines is the 15th largest island on Earth. Over 60 million people live there today. But 67,000 years ago, it was home to something that should not have existed. Calao Cave sits in the Cagayan Valley of northern Luzon. The cave system extends over several chambers, with the largest cathedral like space large enough to contain a small church. Archaeologists had been excavating here since 2003. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. The bone-bearing layer lay 3 meters below the cave floor. The metatarsal was found in a sieve. A single foot bone was not enough to name a new species. The team would spend 12 years finding more. In 2007, a team led by Armand Salvador Migers recovered a single foot bone from the deepest excavation layer. It was human, but it was extraordinarily small. The bone was too small for a modern human adult, but the morphology was wrong for a child. The proportions, the muscle attachment sites, the joint surfaces all indicated a fully mature individual, an adult who was simply very, very small. An adult foot bone the size of a child's. The team knew they had found something extraordinary. Migers and his team returned to Calao Cave year after year. They excavated carefully through layers of sediment spanning tens of thousands of years. More bones emerged from the same layer as the original metatarsal. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. The Filipino-French collaboration was essential. Migers provided fieldwork expertise. Detroit's team provided comparative analysis. Neither could have succeeded alone. By 2019, the team had recovered 13 bones and teeth from at least 3 individuals. 7 teeth, 2 hand bones. 3 foot bones, 1 femur fragment. Each one told the same story. These were adults, and they were tiny. The evidence pointed to a species that defied every existing category. 13 bones, 3 individuals, and a combination of features that matched no known human species on Earth. In April 2019, Florent Dutoit and colleagues published the findings in Nature. They named the new species Homo luzonensis, after the island where it was found. The teeth were the most informative elements. The premolars had 2 or 3 roots, a feature common in earlier hominin species, like Australopithecus, but extremely rare in Homo sapiens. Modern human premolars almost always have a single root, but the tooth crowns were small and simple, more like modern humans than like Australopithecus. The combination was paradoxical, primitive roots supporting modern-looking crowns. The dental anatomy combined features separated by 3 million years of evolution into a single jaw. Enamel thickness fell between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens values. Even microscopically, the species refused categorization. No known species showed this exact pattern. The hand bones added another layer of complexity. The finger bones, called phalanges, were curved in a way that suggested habitual climbing. This curvature is seen in Australopithecus, which lived over 2 million years ago, but not in any recent Homo species. The evidence pointed to a species that defied every existing category. Curved finger bones in a 67,000-year-old species meant that Homo luzonensis may have retained arboreal capabilities. An adult human species that could still climb trees with the efficiency of a primate that lived 3 million years before it. Primitive roots, modern crowns, climbing fingers. A species that mixed features separated by 3 million years of evolution. The foot bones told yet another story. The metatarsals showed features associated with bipedal walking, confirming that Homo luzonensis walked upright. But certain proportional details differed from both modern humans and other known Homo species. The combination was unlike anything in the hominin fossil record. No single ancestral species could explain the mosaic of features. Homo luzonensis appeared to have assembled its anatomy from multiple evolutionary time periods. The evidence pointed to a species that defied every existing category. But here's the twist. Luzon is an island, and 67,000 years ago, it was surrounded by deep ocean. Unlike many Southeast Asian islands, Luzon was never connected to the Asian mainland by a land bridge, even during the lowest sea levels of the ice ages. The water gaps between Luzon and the nearest large landmass were always at least several kilometers wide. This meant that whatever ancestor gave rise to Homo luzonensis had to cross open water to reach the island. A hominin species, potentially predating Homo sapiens by hundreds of thousands of years, somehow crossed the sea. The water crossing problem is one of the biggest unsolved questions in human evolution. Deliberate seafaring requires cognitive abilities that most researchers associate only with Homo sapiens. But Homo luzonensis was not Homo sapiens. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. After major typhoons, vegetation rafts extending hundreds of meters have been documented. Small mammals and primates have survived on such rafts for days. A small group caught on storm debris could be swept across a 30-kilometer water gap in a single day. The ocean chose for them. Some researchers propose accidental dispersal. Natural rafts of vegetation, torn loose during typhoons, could carry small animals and possibly hominins across narrow water gaps. Others argue the crossing required at least rudimentary watercraft. The dating added urgency to the mystery. Uranium series dating of the bone directly and of calcite deposits in the burial layer placed Homo luzonensis at a minimum of 50,000 years ago, with some estimates reaching 67,000 years. At 67,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had barely reached Southeast Asia. The earliest confirmed modern human presence in the Philippines dates to roughly 30 to 40,000 years ago. Homo luzonensis was there first by tens of thousands of years. The parallel with Homo floresiensis is striking. Another island in Southeast Asia, another diminutive hominin species, both surviving long after their mainland relatives went extinct. The islands acted as evolutionary laboratories, preserving ancient lineages that the mainland had already erased. Two islands, two tiny species, both discovered in the 21st century. The island dwarfism hypothesis offers one explanation for the small body size. When large animals colonize islands with limited resources, natural selection can favor smaller individuals who require less food. This process, called insular dwarfism, has been documented in elephants, deer, hippos, and now potentially in hominins. If the ancestor of Homo luzonensis was a normal-sized Homo erectus that reached Luzon and then shrank over thousands of generations, the process would explain the small body size. But it would not easily explain the primitive finger bones. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. A pre-erectus crossing would push the earliest known water crossing back by hundreds of thousands of years. The alternative hypothesis is more radical. The primitive features of Homo luzonensis, the curved fingers, the multi-rooted premolars, may indicate descent from a pre-erectus hominin, a species even older and more primitive than Homo erectus that somehow reached the Philippines. If this second hypothesis is correct, it means a very primitive hominin, perhaps something resembling early Homo or even late Australopithecus, crossed open water to reach an island more than 700,000 years ago. This would rewrite the earliest chapter of human dispersal from Africa. The absence of DNA is the study's greatest limitation. The tropical climate of Luzon degrades DNA far faster than cold or arid environments. No genetic material has been recovered from the Homo luzonensis remains. Without DNA, the evolutionary relationships of Homo luzonensis cannot be directly determined. Whether it descended from Homo erectus, from an earlier hominin, or from an entirely unknown lineage, remains an open question that only morphology can currently address. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Ancient protein analysis identified Denisovan relatives from a Tibetan jaw where no DNA survived. The same technique could place Homo luzonensis in the family tree. Collagen proteins outlast DNA by hundreds of thousands of years. The molecular clock in protein sequences is coarser, but sufficient to place a species in the family tree. Protein analysis offers a potential alternative. Ancient proteins are more durable than DNA and can survive in tropical conditions for longer periods. Proteomic techniques have already been used to analyze hominin remains from warm climate sites in Africa and Asia. DNA is gone, but proteins might survive, and proteins can tell us where this species sits on the human family. The discovery forced a revision of the human evolution narrative for Southeast Asia. The textbook story had been simple. Homo erectus left Africa roughly 2 million years ago and colonized Asia. Homo sapiens followed much later and replaced everything. Now the picture is far more complex. At least 4 different hominin species occupied Southeast Asia simultaneously. Homo erectus on Java, Homo floresiensis on Flores, Homo luzonensis on Luzon, and Homo sapiens, arriving last and eventually becoming the sole survivor. The question of whether Homo sapiens encountered Homo luzonensis is unanswered. The dating ranges overlap. Modern humans arrived in the Philippines between 30 and 40,000 years ago. Homo luzonensis was present until at least 50,000 years ago. If the species did coexist, even briefly, the implications are extraordinary. modern humans standing face to face with a 3-foot-tall hominin species that had been isolated on the island for hundreds of thousands of years. The Calao cave excavations continue. Deeper layers remain unexplored. Older sediments may contain more complete skeletal remains that could resolve the origin debate. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Survey teams now carry ancient DNA sampling kits. Any hominin bone can be immediately sealed for analysis. Other caves across the Philippine archipelago are now being investigated. The discovery of Homo luzonensis at Calao opened the possibility that similar species may be found on other Philippine islands. The Philippines has over 7,000 islands. The archaeological exploration of their cave systems is in its earliest stages. Calao was not chosen because it was the most promising site. It was chosen because it was accessible. The limestone geology of the Philippines creates ideal cave environments for bone preservation. Calcite flowstone sealed the bone-bearing sediments. The Calao bones survived because they were locked under a mineral cap for tens of thousands of years. Thousands of caves remain unexplored by archaeologists. Each one could contain the next Homo luzonensis. 7,000 islands. Thousands of unexplored caves. We found one new human species. There could be more. The discovery had political significance in the Philippines. Homo luzonensis became a source of national pride, evidence that the Philippine Islands had been home to a unique branch of human evolution found nowhere else on Earth. The National Museum of the Philippines now features Homo luzonensis prominently in its Human Origins exhibition. The specimens are stored under climate-controlled conditions at the National Museum in Manila. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Calao proved the Philippines is critical for understanding human evolution. A new generation of Filipino paleoanthropologists is being trained for future discoveries. Filipino paleoanthropologist Armand Salvador Mageres, who led the original excavation, has trained a new generation of Filipino researchers in cave archaeology and hominin identification. The field is no longer dependent on foreign expertise. The broader implications of Homo luzonensis extend beyond the Philippines. Species named since 2000 include Floresiensis, Luzonensis, Naledi, and the Denisovans. Each overturned an assumption about human uniqueness. Every assumption about human evolution has been revised in the past 2 decades. The discovery, combined with Homo floresiensis on Flores and the Denisovans in Siberia, proved that human evolution was far messier and more complex than the linear progression taught in schools. The march of progress, that iconic image of a hunched ape gradually straightening into a modern human, is not just oversimplified, it is wrong. Human evolution was a bush, not a ladder. Multiple species coexisted, competed, and in some cases interbred. 50,000 years ago, at least 4 and possibly more hominin species walked the earth simultaneously. We are the sole survivor of what was once a diverse family. The size of Homo luzonensis is perhaps its most striking feature. Estimated adult height, based on the foot and hand bone proportions, falls between 100 and 120 centimeters, 3 feet to just under 4 feet tall. At this height, a fully grown Homo luzonensis adult would have been shorter than a modern 6-year-old child. Estimated body weight was 15 to 30 kilograms. An adult weighed what a modern 7-year-old weighs. Yet the muscle attachment sites on the bones indicate significant physical strength relative to body size. The combination of small size and robust musculature is consistent with a species adapted to a physically demanding island environment. Climbing, foraging, and navigating steep limestone terrain would all favor compact, muscular body proportions. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Each tool showed deliberate platform preparation before flake removal, intentional stone working by a species with multi-step planning ability. Stone tools have been found in the same layers as the Homo luzonensis remains. The tools are simple but functional. Flake tools, made from local chert and river cobbles, show deliberate napping patterns. Even more intriguing, cut marks on a rhinoceros bone dated to roughly 700,000 years ago have been found at a nearby site on Luzon. This suggests that a hominin, possibly an ancestor of Homo luzonensis, was butchering large animals on Luzon far earlier than the dated bones suggest. 700,000 years, a hominin species on a Philippine island, butchering rhinoceros for at least 700,000 years before the known Homo luzonensis remains. The lineage may extend far deeper than the fossils currently show. 700,000 years on one island. A lineage older than our own species. Hiding in a cave in the question of what killed Homo luzonensis remains unanswered. Competition with Homo sapiens, environmental change, or a combination of both may have driven the species to extinction. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Homo sapiens brought composite tools, projectile weapons, and language. The technological gap was insurmountable. Homo sapiens also brought landscape modification at scale. Fire and forest clearing would have transformed the ecology Homo luzonensis depended on. If Homo sapiens arrived while Homo luzonensis was still alive, the encounter would have been profoundly unequal. Modern humans brought advanced technology, language, long-distance social networks, and the ability to transform landscapes through fire. The bones told a story that no one had imagined possible. Charcoal appears abruptly in cave sediments at the time of Homo sapiens' arrival. Forest burning would have devastated a small arboreal species. Homo luzonensis, with its simple stone tools and small population, would have had no defense against a competitor that could reshape the environment itself. The discovery challenges the assumption that only Homo sapiens was capable of island colonization. At least 2 other species reached islands that required water crossings. This suggests that the cognitive abilities needed for some form of maritime dispersal evolved earlier than previously thought. The evidence pointed to a species that defied every existing category. Facial reconstructions of Homo luzonensis remain speculative due to the absence of skull material. The face of this species is unknown. Only the discovery of cranial remains will allow a reconstruction. We know its hands, its feet, its teeth, but we have never seen its face. That discovery is still waiting. The evidence pointed to a species that defied every existing category. 13 bones and teeth, 3 individuals, 1 cave on an island of 7,000, a species that stood barely 3 feet tall, climbed trees like a primate from 3 million years ago, and walked upright like a human. They were not Homo sapiens. They were not Homo erectus. They were not Homo floresiensis. They were something entirely new, a species we never knew existed, hiding on an island 60 million people now call home. And somewhere in the unexplored chambers of Calao Cave, or in one of the thousands of caves across the Philippine archipelago that no archaeologist has ever entered, a skull may be waiting, the face of a species that evolution hid on an island, and time almost erased completely.